Welcome to your new nightmare. Here's your relook at the NECA toys. This is the 2010 A Nightmare on Elm Street remake, Freddy Krueger. A group of suburban teenagers share one common bond. They all are being stalked by Freddy Krueger, a horribly disfigured killer who haunts them in their dreams. As long as they can stay awake, they can protect one another, but when they sleep, there is no escape. Before we get a closer look at the 2010 remake Freddy Krueger a second time, or third time as it is, first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. Now, I am re-reviewing this because there was a couple of reviewers that asked first if I still had the figure, and if I did, would I consider reviewing him again? Well, I'm more than happy to oblige. Personally speaking, I liked the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. I would even do one further and say that I liked it a little bit more than the remake of Friday the 13th, which I found paced slower. I really quite liked a Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and I always felt that Jackie Earle deserved at least one or two sequels so to fully flesh out his version of Freddy. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Needless to say, though, the remake of Freddy Krueger stands at 6.6 inches in height. And that, in centimeters, makes the figure 16.8, almost 17 centimeters tall. I'm going to bring in a couple of figures for comparisons. I think the more fitting comparison would probably be Nightmare on Elm Street 1 Freddy, the remake that is, to Nightmare on Elm Street 1 Freddy played by Robert Englund. Now this is the original figures. These are the ones, of course, that have the staction legs that have no posability to speak of, so it's probably the best comparison. Jackie Earle's Freddy is considerably short anyways, which makes sense then that he's shorter than another, say, Robert Englund Freddy. And just for some other comparisons as well, we can bring in one of the more articulated Freddys. This one happens to be, let me just get the legs straightened out. This one happens to be the one from A Nightmare on Elm Street, the Dream Warriors, which again kind of gives you an idea of how much shorter Jackie's version of Freddy actually is to the Robert Englund Freddy Krueger, which I think is, again, accurate. Long term, I'm sure we're never going to ever see this guy get re-released in an ultimate version with much needed articulation on his lower legs. So for the time being, if you're looking in the market to pick up this one, this is the only Freddy of the remake that was actually available. And of course, one other comparison we can make would just move that Freddy over for a second. We can also bring in Fred Krueger. Also, there you go, from the remake Nightmare on Elm Street. The figures again are pretty much identical in size to one another. You could even say that Fred Krueger is a little bit taller simply just because he has the hair on top of his head. But the figures are pretty much scaled the same, complete with the exact same lower torso and the exact same shoes. Certainly, if you would like to see a review of the Fred Krueger from the remake Nightmare on Elm Street, let me know down below in the comments section. In the meantime, let's have a look at the accessories that come included with this Freddy Krueger. He does come with very little to be said, actually. He does come with an alternate head, and then he also comes with, of course, his fedora. The fedora, of course, fits on either one of the heads, depending on which head you actually want to go with. So say if you want to take this head sculpt, maybe we'll do some comparisons side to side. One blessing, at least, of actually being able to re-review this figure is I feel I can provide a more clear, detailed look at these figures' head sculpts, which actually I think are quite superior. I mean, they're really decent head sculpts, even if you don't like the remake Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, the difference is between the two. Of course, the mouth is open on this one, the one that currently sits on the neck of this figure, whereas the defaulted one, which I think is the one that came out of the packaging with this head sculpt, this one actually has the closed mouth. This one also has the noted scarring, the ripped open flesh on the side of his cheek, whereas this one doesn't actually have it. To show you, though, the difference between the two with fedoras, we'll go ahead and just pop the hat on, which is not that much different, really, than the one that Robert usually would wear. I think it's very similar in design. It's still made of a softer plastic, yes, and it can fit over top of Freddy's head. It does fit nicely, and it obviously isn't going to go anywhere. But that's what it looks like with the fedora. Now we're going to go ahead and pop this off. I will probably find myself revisiting that figure head sculpt because actually I prefer that one of the two. I'm going to pop this one back in place. You'll see the older figures of NECA's still utilize the ball joints, so they're a little bit more difficult to take the heads off and replace them. Again, there's the difference between the two head sculpts. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think and which is your favorite of the two. One thing I liked about the newer Freddy is it seemed he had more harsh scarring from the burns. that of course became a little bit more comical with Robert Englund's version of Freddy later into the films. I really thought the makeup job on Jackie Earle's version of Freddy was really fantastic. In fact, they even utilized some CG work to kind of remove areas of his face, something, again, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, Freddy Krueger couldn't pull off. To get the fedora on this head sculpt, we'll go ahead and just do the exact same as we did before, just pop that in place. Again, it's entirely your personal preference of the two. Again, I like this one a little bit more, but if you like this one, I think both head sculpts are fantastic. NECA did a really great job on these. For the defaulted head sculpt, again, we'll kind of get a close-up look at his face. I even like the way that the eyes were singed and the way that the scarring was covered over some of his vision. I think that's a nice job. It actually kind of looks like he's got some dead eye going. Like, it doesn't look like he would be able to see very well. The scarring on his face is actually really good. Again, you've got these little carvings of skin where even like the ear, for example, has just been singed right off. Just nice done on the work in the film. It's a shame, again, like the film didn't get the praise that it deserved. I feel like, again, there's nothing really wrong with the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. If you think, yes, it's not Robert Englund, by all means, you can easily go back and watch the original films. I am for the idea of really releasing remakes because, again, it gives you a different opportunity, a different vision in the case of certainly the director and the writing team to kind of take the initial core idea and just doing something different with it. If you don't like remakes, by all means, again, you can always watch the original source material. Those films aren't going anywhere. Just really like the head sculpt on this one. Again, of the two, I prefer this one myself. So just for the rest of this review, I'm going to pop that off. So sorry for that, for anyone that got attached to that head sculpt. I'm going to just replace it with this one right here. A nice, satisfying snap. This one does do the benefit of having some additional red that the other head sculpt didn't quite possess. Again, you can see the ripped away section of his face. Also see the teeth, too, that the other one didn't possess to have. There we go. You can see the teeth there are a very slimy green color. A wash of green paint's been covered over the teeth. Just adds a little bit extra something versus this one right here. Kind of looks a bit like Snoke from the Return, was it Last Jedi? Boy, that really just panned out, didn't it? Really, again, nice designs on the characters. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to add the fedora before I do that. Just a close-up look again at the neck. Again, you've got the burned away ear. In this case, there really isn't a lot of additional paint that's been added to it. I mean, actually, for fun, let me just put the fedora down for a second. I'm going to bring in Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund version. You can see the side-by-side comparison. Very singular color of paint been added to the Jackie Earle version, whereas the original Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy has a lot more darker tones, more exposed wounds of red, you can see there. Whereas Jackie's really is more singular color. I mean, it's just two different designs of one singular character. But again, like, the comparisons are enough that it obviously is a new version of an interpretation of Freddy. It's just been done slightly different to the one that we'd gotten before. I'm going to move him out of the way because obviously the spotlight is on this particular figure. And for the rest of this, I'm going to put the fedora onto his head because I think it just finishes off the look rather nicely. There you go. Let's straighten the fedora out so we have it dead center. I like to actually have it, when I display the figure, the fedora slightly lower on his face. Not maybe that low, but just low enough that you almost don't even see his eyes. I think it pulls off that look rather effectively. As for the outfit, of course, it's your traditional Freddy Krueger colors. The sweater is done in the alternating colors of red and green, which actually, when I'm looking at it here on the camera, it almost seems like it's pulsating, doesn't it? Just the way that the texturing and the paint work done. I like the burns that they've added to the top section of his sweater, but the other Freddy actually didn't even possess. Little areas in which it would have just been, it almost looks like the threading of the sweater has freed and given way, so you can see possibly his top underneath all that. Nice rips done also to the lower area of his torso. A lot of it really does have the weathering and damage done to it. Even on the back has a lot of detailing done to it as well. The colors are still familiar, and yet in the case here of Jackie's sweater, the colors are much darker in contrast, though his pants are much lighter than Robert's figure at least. It is Staction, yes, so there is no possibility to speak of on this particular figure. I guess in the case of this, it doesn't really warrant. I don't think there would be much interest perhaps in getting an ultimate version of Jackie's Freddy. But it certainly would be nice to see this guy with full articulation in his legs. The downside to some of the new Ultimate Freddys is that they do develop loose legs, like that Nightmare Freddy that we looked at from Part 3, the Dream Warriors. I've got slightly loose legs. I'm obviously not going to have that problem with this particular figure because, again, like all his legs are pre-posed, pre-stactioned. Now, one thing about this particular figure is at least the legs are more straight. If you look at the original Freddy, and again, I'm only doing a comparison for the first films, this one has that sort of gunslinger stance that Robert Englund incorporated to his design of Freddy, whereas this particular Freddy only has the more straight legs. So while this one, both of them really, have the more outdated look of lower staction, unposable legs, I almost in a way feel like this particular Freddy can pull off not having as much the dated look because his legs aren't in a pre-posed position. They're just simply just running straight down, if that makes any sense. Nice wrinkles done to the pants themselves. A two-tone effect has been incorporated. So like you got this bluish kind of gray color that they had for the majority of his pants. But then just around the wrinkled areas, it seems like they've brushed, probably dry brushed, a lighter color of that gray. So it just adds a little bit of extra depth to those pants. Of course, he does have his shoes with peg holes on the undersides of his feet. I know the whole time we've been looking at this, we really haven't looked at his glove. The glove is, of course, completely changed from the one that we saw with Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger, and doing a comparison side to side. I know those, we shouldn't really do a comparison, but I mean, certainly for the case of Freddy, we'll bring in his glove. Gone is the plates that cover over the hand. Instead, he's got these strips of metal that come out from the links around his fingers. They're just, like I said, these little individual strands of gold. I really like the design of this glove, although getting the actual wearable version of this glove, it was a little bit more difficult to put on because you actually had to take this, it was like a bracelet here that you actually had to screw in when you put it onto your hand. Actually, they've got it, kind of got it a little bit showing here on the actual sculpted hand. This Freddy also has some blood. I don't know if it was blood from the dog itself. I was just trying to pet him. But he does have a lot, like I said, the blood on each of the individual blades. That's a nice touch as well. Speaking for this guy's articulation, let's go ahead and talk about that right now. His head rotates all the way around. He pretty much has the same articulation you would expect to find with the older Freddy figures, like the head moves up and down. Again, that's such a good look. Usually when it comes to displaying the figure, I kind of like to display him like this. Maybe just a little bit higher in the head. So you see the eyes just a little bit like that. That's a good look. Needless to say, I'm getting lost in myself here. The arms rotate all the way around, and they could hinge out. Now, the arms hinge out almost at a full 90-degree angle bend, but they stop just short of that. So what is that? Well, like 80-degree bend. They, of course, can move all the way around. He does have a bend in the elbow, which also allows the forearms to rotate. And whether you use this hand or you use this hand, they rotate the exact same way. They're just rotating on ball joints. He does have a waist swivel. It's a little tight on this figure. And then for his feet, he just has very limited articulation. This one foot is a little looser on this figure. This foot's a little bit tighter. So there he goes. There's Freddy Krueger. Whether you like or hate the film, it seems more people hate the remake of Freddy, of Nightmare on Elm Street, and of course, Jackie Earle's portrayal of Freddy Krueger. I personally like it a lot more than the remake of Friday the 13th. At least NECA did release a figure of this guy. A little bit harder to come by, so of course if you are in the market picking this one up for yourself, you'd have to source out places like eBay. But I think he's a worth pickup, especially if you don't even like the film, to at least have all the Freddys represented on your shelf, from the one that started at the beginning with Robert Englund all the way, of course, then to the remake Jackie's. It's nice to actually be able to have all the figures on display from the various incarnations of Freddy Krueger. And even if you don't like this one, I do think that NECA Toys did put a lot of detail and paint applications to the actual figure. Now, I can certainly understand the reasoning for the public outcry on A Nightmare on Elm Street's remake. Horror fans are some of the most passionate fans you'll find on this planet. They're the ones that will follow a franchise from start to end, and in their perfect world, they would be content to simply just see another remake come out of A Nightmare on Elm Street and cast Robert Englund for the role of Freddy Krueger. But when a studio decides to step in and remake the film, Remake will tell you right off the bat that they're going a different vision and look for the film, and that usually includes also recasting the main lead. As a result, Jackie Earle had some pretty hard shoes to fill taking them away from Robert Englund, and that was probably one of the reasons why the film didn't do so well. People couldn't accept the idea that this was a new Freddy Krueger. He looked somewhat the same, but acted differently. He was a little darker and meaner. And a lot of times they forget to realize that Freddy Krueger in his early outings in the sequels was a darker, meaner Freddy Krueger. He didn't get comical until later into the franchise. I feel Jackie Earle really deserved to have additional sequels of the Nightmare films so that you could really see what his vision of Freddy was going to be all about. I liked his dark visions of Freddy. I liked the idea that despite the fact that this was a meaner Freddy, he still had time to joke around. And there was still a few jokes thrown into the film, but yet some people still aren't crazy about the Nightmare on Elm Street film. I'm still a big advocate of the idea that remakes could exist in the same world, and if you aren't happy with the way the remakes are envisioning their version of that character, you can always go back. You can always go and watch the originals. So I'm all on board for the idea of getting remakes released of horror films. It gives you, again, the opportunity for new directors and new writing team to take the original source material and just find a different way to present it. Here in the case of Jackie Earle's Freddy Krueger, it's nice to at least see that NECA Toys released this guy, probably with the intent of releasing him before even it was decided that the film was bombing in theaters. At least we got the opportunity to get ourselves a version of Jackie Earle's Freddy in plastic form. And surprisingly enough, it's actually one of my favorite Freddys in my collection because it isn't a Robert Englund Freddy. It looks and feels the same as a Freddy, but then when you look at it really closely, there's a lot of cool stuff going on with the facial sculpt. Again, I love the coloring of his sweater, and I like that there's all these little tears and imperfections to it. Indeed, indeed, it is a nice looking Freddy. If you can get over the fact that yes, it isn't Robert Englund, it's really a nice Freddy to add to your collection. Will we ever see an ultimate version of Jackie Earle's Freddy? Probably unlikely. You never know. Maybe NECA will surprise us. But I do feel this is a great figure to pick up and add to your collection. He's a little bit harder to come by, yes, but he's definitely worth picking up and adding to your collection nonetheless. If you manage to pick up this figure for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section. I will tread lightly to ask this as well. What do you guys think of the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street? A lot of people are probably going to say it sucked. I liked it. That's just me, though. If you guys are digging this content that I'm putting out on a regular basis, may you hit that subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on, and most definitely keep your peepers peeled, because there's going to be a lot of videos coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.